Hush. Not a single sound. I brought you here to tell you a tale, a story about an institution that in many ways still affects a lot of aspects of our daily lives. Let us embark on the journey to discover the gatherings. While opening the double doors to the hall where proceedings happen, you can always hear the whispers of sitting couples and the loud shouting of the main speaker. He stands on the podium. Beside him, around 20 ministers, each one holding a briefcase with the logo of the corresponding department. They come up to the lectern after the main speech to analyze, interpret, try to solve various problems, and say their part about topics that are currently being discussed. Every one of them nimbly uses the language and gesticulation for advising the humbly sitting people about what should they do and not do with their lives. The whole ordeal makes all the air molecules tense, and everyone can feel the pressure building up. Yet it never releases. All those that seem to notice become just more and more overwhelmed. The meetings happen every day. Sometimes they last from dusk to dawn, but usually everything ends after around 3 or 4 hours. It all depends on the amount of prepared speakers and the topics at hand. Some argue that the frequency of the gatherings makes both the ones watching and the performers not remember any of them, but others ascertain that the best ones are memorized by them from top to bottom. The truth is that most people have a few favorite moments of all speeches to which they compare all the others, mostly on the basis of rhetorical beauty and the tone of voice or other physical characteristics of the speaking person. In very few cases, the outrage of the populace plays a factor. Half of the seated enter the hall a few minutes before the opening ceremony. At 9 a.m., the main speaker arrives with the ministers. For a quarter of an hour, each one on the podium is introduced to the experienced crowd, as if it was the first time there, but no one new attended this event for at least 4 years. Sometimes, because the speakers want to wait for the late arrivals, the minister of the Songs and Sings department entertains the crowd with the organization's anthem. Everyone says that the performance is always done brilliantly, and yet the words don't seem to convey anything meaningful. That minister is always one of the top singers from the crowd. Most of the people that occupied that seat didn't do anything else except singing the anthem. After the introductions, the minister of the gong mastery department hits his instrument to indicate the end of the ceremony of introductions. The gathering officially starts, and the doors are closed. For about 15 minutes, the main speaker talks about all the current initiatives of the organization, the dues, contributions, renovations, complications, disputes, news that don't concern any of the listeners. Some of the sitting people, out of respect for the speaking man, silently play poker, throw dice, whisper or conspire against the ones on the podium, in order to influence the upcoming elections. Some of the sitting people, out of respect for the speaking man, silently play poker, throw dice, whisper or conspire against the ones on the podium in order to influence the upcoming elections. The next quarter of an hour is used by the main speaker to introduce the topics of upcoming speeches and the people responsible for those parts of the gathering. Usually 2 or 3 people agree to talk about one topic, based on the expertise of the department. For example, the question, "Does one have to cultivate his garden?" was discussed by the ministers of gardening, work and duty. The first one is a gardener in his spare time. The second one used to work, but the meetings turned out to be too time-consuming, so he had to quit. The Department of Work usually has a lot to do. And the last one had done the things that he had to all his life, or at least that was the main talking point of his electoral campaign. Each of them talked in turns about the topic. The gardening minister said that if one wants to become a gardener, then one should. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense. The working man rhetorically asked 2 questions. What is life, but not work? And what is work, if not life? The last speaker explained that he never cultivated, and that it was the right approach. They of course said more to fully exhaust the set time of their performance, but no one remembers what exactly. The topic was fully explored in the eyes of the public. All the perspectives were featured. Some took one side, the others took some other one. That's how most of the speeches look. The rest of the first hour is uneventful for anyone other than the ones warming up their voices and polishing up the details of their presentation. The speeches were already submitted to and approved by the Performances Ministry, as well as by the head speaker. The only things that needed establishing were how to modulate the tone, at which person in the crowd should the speaking person stare, and where to put in those one-liners that describe the actual view represented on the stage. Everyone focuses on being the most memorable as they can be because of the elections. Sometimes more cunning performers seek out the emotions in the crowd when delivering the perspective-defining sentence, and post hoc change it to something that the people find easier to agree to. Those that do it skillfully only lose their seat because of illness. The 45-minute series of speeches occur every hour, except the first one, until all the topics are talked over. The sitting people look at the ones talking very perceptively and take notes about if they think that they should still be taking up the seats in appropriate departments. After each series there's a break that lasts a quarter of an hour, in which the main intrigues play out, buying up votes for the next election, under-table deals to only discuss a part of the upcoming topic which suits the narrative of some oil company, and other devious things that there are only rumors of. Few say that the votes are counted not in the way that they should be, and shout out that they should be the new minister of whatever. Most of the people stay in their seats though, and just talk to their neighbors, almost as if they didn't care about all the dodgy stuff taking place around them. At the end of all the topics, the main speaker explains to everyone what will be talked about in the next day of the gatherings. And then the elections happen. Everyone that wants to run for some department comes up onto the podium and tries to persuade the sitting population that he or she is a better fit than the current minister. Then those that are in favor of that person becoming one of the speakers raise their hands, and their votes are counted. If the candidate gets more than 50% of the people that currently reside in the hall to vote for him, then he gets the seat. Some say that the very idea of this process is right, and that it gets the best people to their righteous place in the organization, but a lot of people think otherwise. They think that it only counts for the rhetorical value of a person, and not for his or her expertise. They point out that the most of the higher-ups never change, even though all they do is speak, eat, use the organization's money on physical pleasures, and not research all the things that they are speaking about. The truth is that usually those that sit remain seated for the rest of their lives, and those that stand tall above them are voted to stay up in the cloudy skies of power. Things didn't used to be that way, though. Old scriptures explain the idea behind creating those gatherings. They were supposed to gather up all the possible answers for all possible questions that the human mind could master. There wasn't any hierarchy, anyone could talk and debate about everything. All the points and arguments were recorded in books that everyone who wanted to could read. But as the gatherings became popular and respected, something changed. People forgot, or didn't know in the first place, about the true meaning of all this. The meetings were becoming much more formal, as well as scripted, and after a while the skilled rhetoricians took over. The substance became obsolete, the form triumphed. No more arguments could be heard, only colorful and beautiful speeches. Nowadays, no one bothers to write them down into magnificent tomes. Only sometimes one or two journalists use them for their articles to show off one perspective which they consider to be the right one of some argument. I was once sitting here and once stood on that podium, but I found out about all that had happened and left. Now I try to find my own answers to questions that were once asked on those gatherings. Frankly, I don't know if it makes any sense. But what else is there to do?